Yo, what up everybody, it's Tuna. So in today's video I wanted to show you guys a little update for the Fulcrum Chieftain. Felt like I owed it to you boys. There's been a lot of improvements made on the build. It's basically gotten to the point where it can do all of the back to basics T17 content. And the answer to it all was basically just Transcendence and going for a lot of that elemental damage reduction, as well as fully converting all of the physical damage we take to elemental, so we don't have to ever worry about that anymore. So with Transcendence, in addition with the max resistances that we get from Chieftain, and also some other technology that we implemented on top of that, the build has just become absolutely insane. So not only can it clear all of the T17 content, but you can kill bosses too with Vile Breach, and it just pops off in general. So I figured I would make a video for you guys with updated PoB, just sort of as a showcase for you boys that are still playing the build and are looking to look for basically the next step in progression in the build. And yeah, what you need to get the build to this stage, right? Because it's basically just like a very lounging type of build. And yeah, I feel like Shayd has just been like min-maxing the build to the point where I feel like it's something that you guys should check out and maybe aim towards if you are really enjoying the Fulcrum Chieftain. So yeah, definitely a big shout out to Shayd. He is a member of my community and we do a lot of back and forth theory crafting, but he is a mastermind behind figuring half of the things out for this build. So I really appreciate him for having a lot of back and forth with me, and in general for his contributions to the build. Yeah, thank you very much. All right, so I wanted to go over, first of all, the major changes with the build. And the major changes will be, of course, that we are actually using Mage Blood. All right, so Mage Blood is absolutely mandatory because we need the additional resistances granted by the Ruby Flask. So the additional resistances as well as the maximum resistances are needed because we are now using Melding of the Flesh. Melding of the Flesh actually enables us to max out our resistances. We can kind of double dip on maximum resistances through Melding of the Flesh by having maximum res from our Ruby Flask in addition to the auras that we are using. Something that you'll notice with this setup is that we are using Purity of Lightning as well as Purity of Fire, because we actually can double dip Melding of the Flesh with Valakos Embrace, which is the ascendancy that is giving us max resistance to our from our fire res. So when we use Mage Blood with the Ruby Flask, Purity of Fire, Purity and Lightning, we can actually get 90% max resistances even when we have Transcendence. And if you guys know what Transcendence does, it makes your maximum resistance lower, but because we have so much additional maximum resistance and the fact that we can cap our maximum resistance with Melding of the Flesh as well as Valakos, we can get to maximum 90% with all of those new things, right? So this is kind of enabled by the fact that the new Ruby Flask gives max resistance instead of less damage taken, which is kind of cool. So that's like tech that we have access to this. All right, so what does Transcendence do? Transcendence is a keystone that is granted by the Legion Jewel, the Militant Faith here that you can see once you roll a Templar, High Templar Historic. By the Templar Historic, exactly, that's what he's called. I knew that. But anyways, the Transcendence is giving you armor applies to fire, cold, and lightning damage taken from hits instead of physical damage. So essentially, you're able to build a ton of armor and reduce the elemental damage that you take substantially thanks to this keystone. But the big downside of it is that it gives you minus 15% to all elemental resistance. But as we previously mentioned, thanks to having Purity of Lightning, Melding of the Flesh, Purity of Fire, as well as a Ruby Flask and Valakos Embrace, we can still juice our auras up to have 90% maximum resistance. But the caveat is that you do actually need a +2 Cloak of Flame, and the +2 Cloak of Flame, in addition to the reduced critical damage from critical strikes, is going to be damn expensive. So it's either you go for reduced critical strike or +2, but without the +2 you won't actually cap out at 90%. So you might actually have to make a little bit of a compromise here between not being fully crit immune or not having 90% maximum resistance. But if you are an oiler, of course, try to get this +2 and 50% because it's a pretty big, yeah, damage reduction boost. But basically you can kind of dodge maps that have critical strike on them, or take an L and die from time to time. But yeah, this is a min-max build, so just kind of want to showcase you guys what you can do with it. But what that allows you to do is that allows you to have an insane max hit. You know, we get up to crazy amounts of EHP on this build, assuming that, you know, your progenesis is up, because we won't have a lot of flash generations like Pathfinder and that kind of stuff. So you are sort of always relying on killing to get your flash charge back for your progenesis. But even without that, we still have really good recovery because of the fact that you use Defiance of Destiny in combination with the Immutable Forces and the Blood Notch, which essentially is going to make you almost immune to anything except for the big one-shots. But the big one-shots you mitigate through, of course, having Transcendence, as well as maximum resistance capped at 90, and all of that additional, damage reduction that we get from shifting the physical damage to elemental. So yeah, that is the additional downside that we get from Transcendence, is that we no longer have any armor, so mitigating physical damage is really hard. So the way that you have to mitigate physical damage now is by shifting all of it to elemental, and that is the only way to survive physical damage on this build, is you need to go for as high physical damage shift to fire as possible. So we get 40% from body armor here, and we get 10% from the fracture here on the helmet, as well as 8% from the implicit there as well. And we do have to still worry about shocks. So crafting a chance to avoid shock on the helmet is something that you definitely want here too. And we'll also just get maximum resistance, as well as additional some life regeneration and that kind of stuff on the boots to mitigate the fact that like there's still going to be damage over time in this game. So yeah, getting life regeneration is going to be nice for those damage over time, to mitigate that damage over time. And we actually settled on going for a helical ring. Helical rings are a pain to craft. Generally, you want to be doing a fracture on these. They're horrible to craft, but they are an insane amount of defense as well as damage. So getting a good crafted helical ring is going to be one of the priorities for the rares on this build, as well as, getting a nice corruption on your chest to cap out on maximum resistance. But in addition to all that, we also fit in a rational doctrine. The rational doctrine is nice because it allows you to get consecrated ground when you create it when you are stationary, and then it lingers on you for 4 seconds. So it's just a nice little boost of, by little I mean a lot, it's a nice big boost of regeneration. So that's cool as well. And the rest of the build is essentially going to be very similar to the previous build that I was running. However, I'll go over the POB so you guys have an idea of the things that changed with this build. So the primary thing is that you're going to be pathing all the way down to Iron Reflexes. And what that does is that enables you to use a Jade Flask to boost your armor. You're going to be getting a lot of armor from this. We are currently at a total of 254,000 armor. Sorry, it took me a second to see it there. But yeah, and that armor is going to be mitigating the elemental damage that we take. So you can see that if we take this off, this is going to give us it's gonna basically like be inflated by the fact that evasion technically gives you effective hit pool, but your max hit goes down by 60%. So your elemental max hit taken goes down from 190 down to 111,000. And yeah, that's why we go path all the way down to here. But it also enables you to take Champion of the Cause as well as some life and a jewel socket there too to fit. And the remainder of the tree is very similar. However, we do eventually actually path down to Elemental Overload, and we do take Defiled Forces, because Defiled Forces actually is really nice. When it's triggered, you don't get the downside of ailments being removed from you, because you do not actually cast the curse spell itself. But what that lets you do is that lets you refresh the curses that it lets you refresh the ignite that you have inflicted on an enemy. So say that you have like a big DD under a boss or something like that. This allows you to sort of refresh it by just having it linked in your cast on stunned. And then for the rest, we'll go up here and we'll take the Militant Faith so that we can fit our Transcendence. And yeah, you can get some stuff on your Militant Faith as well. In this case, we got elemental damage as well as effective non-cursed auras per devotion, which is a nice little boost as well. It gives you a little bit of damage and whatnot. And yeah, that is pretty much all for the tree. Now the next really important part, and this is one of those things that is really gonna like make your build so much tankier, because we are really susceptible to dying to physical damage. And I had the meanest voice crack there, but yeah, we're dying to physical damage. So we need to have physical damage taken from hits as elemental, right? So we shift that through a Watcher's Eye, and the Watcher's Eye needs to have Purity of Fire and Purity of Lightning. Now, there are no other ways to do this. Since you can't use Purity of Elements, since you are a self-ignite build, you have to have this double Watcher's Eye. That's going to be a lot of the physical damage that you take shifted over and basically make you have a much higher Fizz max hit. Now you want to convert as close to as 80% as possible, because if you have less than that, then you are still able to actually take a lot of physical damage, and that is going to be what is killing you on this build the most, since you do not have any armor to mitigate that because of Transcendence. Yeah, just try to get it as high as possible. It is very important. Okay, so lastly, the thing that I get asked a lot on this build is, how do you kill the T17 boss? And thankfully, Shayd is going to showcase it for us here. So what he does is he walks in, he presses his Val Breach, he will proc the boss so that you have a lot of those monsters under the boss itself, and then you will detonate those bosses and those mobs, and those mobs will inflict a massive ignite on Dodri, as you see. And now that we have killed her, she is going to leave a corpse on the ground, and that corpse can actually be detonated because of DD. And as soon as that happens, then you'll see that a big ignite is then procced onto the bosses themselves, and that allows you to basically one-shot T17 bosses. So the most favorable map to run on this character is going to be the Abomination map because of this, because the bosses themselves are actually leaving corpses for you to detonate. So yeah, running Abomination map on this build is really nice. Also because of the corridors being really tight, so you can just basically run through them and deal your damage as you're running. So yeah, alright, so that about sums up everything that you guys need to know about the new iteration of the Fulcrum Chieftain. So once again, thank you very much, Shayd, for min-maxing it to this point, and I really appreciate having somebody to bounce ideas off of, as well as, in general, like being able to have, like, I just feel very blessed to have such smart people in my community, to be able to present these, like, very cool type of builds to you guys. So yeah, thanks very much, and I hope you guys have found this video helpful. Of course, the path of building is going to be in the description, and for any of you guys that have been running the Fulcrum Chieftain and enjoying it, thank you, and I hope this video has helped you guys sort of know where to go with the build from here, and yeah, I hope to see you guys again soon. I appreciate it, guys.